Child Development 107, Chapter 5, Birth and the Newborn. Super excited to talk about babies today. So I'm going to share the screen. And again, if you guys have any questions at any time, just jump in, raise your hand, put it in the chat. That's what I'm here for. So let's get our slides going in here. And so I know some of you said that you've already been around babies. That really helps because babies are pretty fascinating. Again, I shared that I'm not like super in love with diapers, and the puking's kind of weird, and like all that, like, the thing where they like drinking their bottle and like the milk goes down here and then you don't wipe it real good and then they smell super sour. Yeah, that's not my favorite, but it's not the end of the world. Like I'll be like, oh, stinky baby needs a bath. I'm down with that. Like, love that. I think water is the best thing for babies, and we'll get into that. So again, the first slide that we always see, you guys can see the slides, right? Please let me know.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so the first slide is usually the rhetorical question section, right? What part of an infant grows most in the first 2 years? We already know this, right? And if you don't, you could just wait for the answer. We'll get there. Yeah, we'll cover these sections. Are babies essentially blind and deaf at birth? What happens if a baby does not get his or her vaccinations? Oh, oh yes. Oh yeah. It is, the anti-vax thing is a complete debate. I'm not sure if we'll actually get there today. But yeah, there's a lot more information out now. Yeah, science is real. Okay, good. So again, for babies, when they come out, they are super tiny. Now, we've heard about super teeny tiny babies, and we'll talk about birth weight, and then we've talked about large children. We talk less about large children in here, which is interesting. But the average weight is 7 pounds. 7 pounds, 20 inches, right? So 7 pounds. Some of us have dogs bigger than that, right? So here's a ruler. This is 12. And let's add another 8. Let's add another 20 inches. That seems really long. I'm getting it. Let me go back like this. About like this. That seems really long for a 7-pound child. That's interesting. I really thought about that. I was exactly 7 pounds, which is weird because I tell people, your birth weight does not predict the rest of your weight. It does not. And then we've heard of 6-pound babies being fine. My son was 3.35, I think, and fine. My friend had a 1.6, fine. And then we've also heard of 10-pound babies and 12-pound babies. And like one in like every 200 kids comes out with a tooth, like something like, wow, big kids that have, really matured in there. But they actually grow about 10 inches. So let's say, Peyton was, for lack of a better description, he was like, there's my one water bottle, but this is like a little bit too wide. Like he fit from my elbow, crick of my elbow to the crick of my wrist. He fit like that, but he was like half of this size, so about 3.3. Something maybe more like, I don't know. I have just like weird stuff over here. Maybe something like lint brush. Yeah, maybe more like this, like something like that. Yeah, like that was an entire human. His head seriously was this big. I have a picture where my hand is in the picture, and if I put my regular hand on the picture, it's like to scale, like it looks almost the exact same size as my actual hand. So my hand was about around his head, about like this, which is unbelievable because the fact that babies can be that strong and grow no matter what, it's just unbelievable. And yeah, he's strong. He's so strong and so healthy. It's so amazing. But here's the thing, 10 inches by age 1, that's a lot. If a child's like, if they say 20 inches, that's the average, and they're growing 10 inches, that's 50% of your height. So think of your height right now. Let's say you're 5 foot. Let's say in the next year, you got another 2.5 feet tall. How much energy would it take your body to stretch and do that? 2.5 feet in a year. 10 inches for a baby is about 1 inch a month. which doesn't seem like a lot because an inch is like this, right? But what does it take to grow? How do you get an inch taller or an inch longer? How does one's body get an inch taller or an inch longer? Tenth grade biology class. How does our body get longer, bigger? I can wait. And I guess, anybody guess? Got a guess? How does a body get longer? Let's just talk about our femur, our bones, our largest bones in our body, our leg bones, our femurs. How does a femur get 1 inch longer? It's okay to say nobody knows. Say I have no idea.
It occurred to me that I don't know, and it's so embarrassing.
And it's weird. It's a weird.
So here, about.
I'm not here to embarrass anybody because here's the deal. Okay, so I really honestly think humans, as we get more sophisticated, we kind of we lose the basics a little bit. Yeah, which is fine. I mean, it's what I'm here for. So you guys remember cell division, right? Just similar to where the blastocyst divides 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, right? Similar to that, every cell that needs to grow needs to double. Yeah, right? So it's cell division. Instead of having 200,000 bone cells, you have to now make 200,000 and, well, divide those. Each one makes its own friend. So 400,000, 800. Yeah, we have to keep but how? Okay, so each cell divides to make another one, right? And then sometimes when cells die, they have to replace themselves. So cells are constantly splitting, either replacing themselves or making new ones, making new buddies, right? So and you guys remember growing pains? Like, especially like I remember like in my teens, like in my bones, like have achy bones. Do you guys remember that? It was just weird. As like, I mean, I got 2 inches taller after high school because I was like really, really active. So it was like I was having growing pains into my 20s, and our body technically still grows. Our brain still grows till 25. So as our bodies are growing, think about the energy it takes. A newborn or a person, a humanoid who's only been on the planet for a month to grow an inch. It's mind-blowing to me. And FYI, this is where you can, if you're not sure about this stuff, deep dive it. If you're like, oh my God, I don't know that stuff, use it as your deep dive. That's your clue. Stuff that gets you like excited or like, holy crap, I don't know that. Deep dive. Use that as your deep dive. Seriously. Start looking it up right now and you can probably get your deep dive like started. Like, remember, even if it's a journal, it's a 2-part piece. The first part's a journal, second part's a deep dive. You can start your deep dive right now. Right? And come back to it. It's not like you have 2 chances to do your journal. You can update it and update it and update it as much as you want. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, it's okay to say, hey, I don't know this stuff, or maybe I had it and I don't remember it. And yeah, there's a whole super process, and I'm not going to go into that, but it's one of those pieces where if we keep that in mind, doesn't that explain a few things for an infant's body, a toddler's body, a preschooler's body, a 4th grader's body, right? How about a teenager's body? Right? What does it take to grow hair? What does it take to, grow muscle fiber? Same thing. So it's pretty amazing if you really just look at this little human being that's like in your hands and just growing, really. And when do we do most of our growth? We know this. This one's easy. When do we do most of our growth? What time of the day?
Sleeping, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why babies sleep so dang much. I was thinking maybe my dog was getting taller, but that's not happening. So, right. And then check this out. After 1 year, there's physical growth slows. So there's this massive like growth that happens in the first year. Excuse me. My niece and nephew are from Korea, and they there's a traditional celebration there where they have a 100-day celebration, not their first year birthday, but they do that as well. But if the child's made it to 100 days, which is 3 months in a week or so, they're like, yay, they're probably going to make it. So, so the emphasis on that first year is very clear. But here's the thing: at the age of 2, you're about half of your adult height. So whatever height you were right now, divide that in half. That's how tall you were at 2, give or take. Yeah, 1/5 your adult weight. If that still holds true. No, I think I've exceeded that milestone there. And so there's a lot of growing that happens, but at the same time, we've got to understand that the body is going through some changes. Now, we use terms in this chapter like norms and percentiles. Now, norms doesn't mean that like breakfast place on like mean and 17th. It means normative, and that's why it expected. I don't like using the word normal. It usually means normative, meaning an expected behavior, an expected trend, an expected thing that happens. And so like in the winter, it gets cold. That is normative, right? For the winter. Although a couple weeks ago, we had like 85 degrees. Not normative, but technically we're in Southern California, so somewhat normative, right? Percentile is if you put everybody in the same room and you rank them, and you could tell who's in the top 25, top 50%, top 75%. Percentile is literally ranking people not against each other, but comparing them to each other. And so as we go forward, let's keep this in mind. So as we go by height and weight, so the first 2 years, who is the biggest? For the first 2 years, who's the biggest? Who wins first 2 years? So on this chart, the dashed line is what?
Boys.
Yeah. So that, it's kind of interesting because we talk about, boys are a little bit bigger as adults. Boys are generally larger, but that holds true here in the first 2 years. After the first 2 years, the girls win. Girls win until like the boys hit puberty. And we'll talk, this is a little bit common knowledge here that girls hit puberty first. And then when the boys hit puberty, they start to get taller and stronger and whatnot. So basically between the age of 2 and about 14, girls win by height and weight, right? It's kind of interesting. Also keep in mind that there are more boys born, but more women on the planet. How is that possible? More boys born, but more women on the planet.
Men die sooner.
Say it again.
Men die sooner.
Men die sooner. Absolutely. What else? Have you ever seen a YouTube video with the water slide coming off the top of the house down whatever rickety ladder by a bunch of women? I'm not saying women don't do that stuff, but men have more of that thrill-seeking issue, or more risk-taking, more dangerous, and may have more accidents. Absolutely. They're also, generally in our country, we have more men in the military. There's that as well. Yeah. So it's interesting, and happy International Women's Day, by the way. Yes, for the 51% of the planet who is women. Congratulations. We have an international day. There, and I love this one. I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert too. After this picture kind of inspired me to put something like this on your next exam. Yeah. So what if I said I don't know if it's the essay or the extra credit, where you literally watch a video and you get to pick out course terms from this chapter that match a baby's growth for the first year. It is 1 second per day of life of a child. And he's similar to this little guy. But you can see how in the first picture on the left, they're kind of like blobby and the tongue's already working, which is really cute. And then you take them to the beach in the summer, and it's all about the sunscreen and the hat and whatnot. And they eat the sand. You're like, ew, don't eat the sand. No sand. It's yucky. And then they eat the sand. And then, when they're like 2 and 3 and 4, they know what they want, and they know what they can do, and they just start to individualize. Is really, really cool. And I love how you see like this little bob, and then you kind of see like maybe the eyebrows and the eyes, they kind of stay the same. You kind of see, right? If you didn't tell me this was the same kid, I'd be like, okay, could be or couldn't be, right? Because it's hard, because when they're little, itty bitty, you can kind of see features. You'll see, say like, oh, that's my dad's nose or his mom's eyes or whatever, blah, 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 whatever situation. So I see in the older picture, this little, almost like I have cartoon vision. Maybe that's one of my superhero gifts. I see a senior picture right here, actually. Like less of a baby face, longer, you know, more mature, but probably the same haircut in a version of that. And just a good looking, you know, like that smile will actually carry forward, right? It's a similar smile, but you don't see the smile here, but it's a similar smile. You see like, I know it's really, really tiny, but you see these nice little cuts right here and a very like balanced smile that will carry forward. That's a trait that's pretty static and it will carry forward. So also I like to be around kids like that, and I'll see like, oh, I can see your finger. That's just me. Maybe I'm old and that's what I can do now. Now we mentioned this earlier, infants sleep a lot. So 15 to 17 hours a day, that's more than half the day, which I like, love it. And over the early weeks, REM sleep and traditional sleep declines rapidly. So, you know, that rapid eye movement, you'll see little babies have that. It's really, really sweet, but it declines. It doesn't mean anything bad. It just means that the brain is less active, and had the slow wave sleep. Slow wave means that's where the growing is happening, right? For us as adults, we have less slow wave sleep and we have more REM sleep. My stupid Fitbit will tell me what kind of sleep what patterns I have, and it gives me a score. And so, yeah, I get feeling inadequate right when I wake up. It's so fun, super fun. Yeah, I'm not a great sleeper. That is one of my non-skills. Um, and so that's kind of why I got the Fitbit, I guess, to yell at me and tell me when to go to bed, and then I summarily ignore it. Uh, so again, patterns of sleep has a lot to do with maturation, genes, and environment. Sometimes kids are good sleepers, and sometimes their parents were, and sometimes they weren't. I don't know what I was as a sleeper as a baby, but I do like sleep. It's not that I don't like it. Insufficient may be a problem for parents and the infant. Overstatement of the year. That was a thing where like parents were, people would tell me, oh, when the baby sleeps, you should sleep. I'm like, but I have laundry to do and dishes and stuff like that. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. And then I started giving it up, because Peyton, when he's up, even when he was little, it was 0 to 60 and I'm still getting texts from the school today at 14. So again, I tell people, get your sleep where you can get your sleep. Again, hopefully you have a support system and a partner that helps, because once you're sleep deprived, it is cumulative and you're not making great choices. And let's go back here to real quick. This infant right here, and we're going to talk about our cognition and our emotions. This infant right here is staring at you and wants everything from you and cannot do anything for itself for months and months and months and months. And we will find out in chapter 7 that it takes them 90 days to even acknowledge you with sort of a smile. When's the last time you had a job and you went 3 months with somebody not even giving you a smile? Yeah, parenthood is hard. We'll talk about here about co-sleeping and bed sharing. It's a cultural practice. I've worked with families here who bed share like a massive bed, and there's like 4 or 5 people in it. That's fine. We discourage that in our country because we believe that's sudden infant death syndrome, which is SIDS. It has to do with like loose bedding, or as an adult you can like roll over and suffocate a child. It happens. It actually happens less than you think, but then also more than you think. SIDS seems like something that's easily remedied by having a proper crib. When you take health, safety, and nutrition, we'll go over that. Teaching that right now, super fun. But if you look at it, most of the Asian countries, they practice that, and it's not wrong. It's just culturally significant. And once they come to America, they can still practice that. We just, you know, if there's any sort of like social services intervention, we try to like just provide some education there. Now SIDS, again, on its own, if you're not sure what that is, it's sudden infant death syndrome. It's can happen to kids even when they're not co-sleeping. So again, it's not that co-sleeping makes SIDS happen. It's not. We had a few years ago, SIDS go through daycares, meaning like nap time, and kids died. It is literally scientists and doctors do not have a clear definition of SIDS. It's one of those things that's like sudden infant death syndrome. Yikes, right? So just know that SIDS is still present. It's still prevalent even during nap times. It's wild. It's another thing where like, that's one thing they don't really tell you until after you're a parent, that you're like so consumed by this thing and you're like watching it sleep. And then you have those like horrific thoughts that go through your head. Like, what if, if this child died, or what if we were in a car accident, or what if there was a hurricane, or like these really bizarre thoughts. You get these bizarre thoughts like all the time. And so, yeah, to me, I was very blessed that I didn't ever co-sleep or co-regulate with Peyton. When he was in the hospital, we got to spend the night in the hospital one night, which kind of freaked me out a little bit, quite frankly. And he was used to a little isolate, so he's always slept on his own. We snuggle, but we don't sleep together. In fact, if we snuggle and we start falling asleep, I'm open. I'm up. Yeah. So question, anyone? Question.
Yeah, when I went to get them, because I had to go after.
I will mute. There we go. Okay. Next up, let's see, like, let me show this. There we go. Oi, brain changes. Yes, although we talk about brain changes when it comes to the body, we are not talking about brain structures. Consider the brain as a framework, as a closet where we store all our stuff, right? In our cognition chapters, we'll talk about what's inside the brain, how it works, how it's growing. We'll talk about in the physical body part, its actual size and things like that. So brain is a fast growing organism. Hundreds of thousands of neurons firing, creating new neural pathways. Hundreds of thousands every time I snap. Do we want to fill those experiences and those neural pathways with junk, trauma, TV, substance abuse? Yeah, babies' brains grow that fast. That fast. It is unbelievable. It's a magical mystery tour. And then later, if we don't use the things, we prune them back, and we'll talk about that too. Head sparing occurs when the body is physically challenged. So that has to do with malnutrition. It has to do with physical abnormalities, or maybe something's going on with the mom. It's the same thing. I did put a thing in the module about head sparing. It's really kind of sad, but it basically says the body will spare the head and wither the body, because the brain is that important, right? Because we can always build the body back. Oh, it's wild. So if you've seen those little kids in like, starving nations where their head is really big and their body's like really tiny. Yeah, right. Or you'll even see like a large belly. That's a sign of like, head sparing, where the head is still really big. It happens in utero as well. So I did put some pictures in there just so you guys had them, but I will ask probably one question on that on the test. So neuron is one of billions of nerve cells, central nervous system. We get to next chapter, we're going to make a brain, and the next unit, we're going to make actual brain cells, which I'm really excited about. Most neurons are created before birth. Before birth. So are you saying like the brain is just growing and it's like empty and stuff, or are they actually learning? Yeah, babies can hear. Yeah, in the womb. There's actually a website called Prenatal University. I think I put it in there as well. Prenatal University. Yeah, right? In infancy, the human brain has billions of neurons. A toddler is learning like yeah, unbelievable. Just even if you had like, and don't ask me why I have like a little white chain here. Let's say you had one of those like baby rattles. You're just holding it in front of them. And like baby rattles are multicolored, right? And infants can't see color, and we'll talk more about that. But even if you're holding like your keys, which are super filthy, so don't give those to a kid. If you're just holding a toy in front of them, it could be a stuffy. It could be, oh, this is even better. Here's my fidget du jour. So even if I was just doing this, just playing with something in front of them, like this, they're learning. The neurons are firing. They are seeing things. Right? Have you ever just stared at a baby and played like face games with them and just been like, and see what they do? Even a baby like 2, 3, 4 weeks old can go like that. Maybe not to the side, but you have a tongue and I have a tongue, and they're learning. And by the way, tongue movement is pre-language development. What? Yeah. Yeah. So every single moment, even clicking them into a car seat is a learning opportunity. Yeah, it's wild. It just blows my mind. Think of it like all the data and files and videos and clips uploaded to YouTube right at the second. It's kind of like that. It's the uploading of information. I used to know what the statistics were, like how many hours of video were uploaded every minute in YouTube, and it's just surpassed so much. And we're not even talking about Instagram and Twitter or even TikTok, right? And so just so much going on. A brain is even more brilliant than that. Yeah. And so we will talk more about neurons in here and how they I actually ran across a video where it shows one actually being created. It's like, wow, how does that happen? But this is basically your telephone and your brain. Messages that go from one place to the other. And by the way, these are not just pieces of information. It's pieces of information that says, move my arm like this, wiggle my fingers like this, blink like this, rub my nose. Like all of those things are pieces that are coming from my brain, coming so quickly down the spinal column, out to my hand, out while I'm talking and breathing and my heart's beating and I'm sitting here trying not to feel my clothes on my body or, manage my coffee, this and that, or like, right. There's billions and billions of things going on at the same time in our body. And think of it with a baby, they're brand new to it. We're kind of old hat. I've picked up a cup of coffee before. I've brushed my hair before. Everything for them is new. So there's this exuberance, meaning almost like fireworks. If you can imagine fireworks in the sky, that's what a baby's brain is doing. Isn't that wild? And these are the parts of the neurons here, and we'll talk more about this, the axon, dendrite, synapse, neurotransmitter. We will have an activity where we actually put these together. I love it. So make sure that you know the definitions of these for now. And then I will make sure that we have, let's see, I think I have a picture of it in here. Next one. So again, this myelination, the axon coating that speeds neuron. So if we go back here, let me read this to you though. So the axon is one of the fibers that extends from a neuron, which is like the base of the cell, and transmits electrochemical impulses. Now, it goes from the axon connects to a dendrite of other neurons. It's kind of like the sender and the receiver. So Amazon sends you, like you order something from Amazon sends you a package and you receive it, right? So axon to dendrite, axon to dendrite, axon to dendrite. The dendrite collects it, right? It might be my front door, it might be my mailbox, right? And it receives the impulses, right? Now, the thing is that the synapse is this part in between. And I think I do have pictures in there. The synapse is actually, they don't even touch. It's interesting. It's kind of like your Amazon delivery driver. He can drop it off at the door. I don't even see him, but I still got the message, right? I still got the package. So they don't even touch. They just get really, really close. And then they send these chemicals in between, which is a neurotransmitter, right? And this brain chemical carries the information from the axon to the dendrite. And guess what? This is where medicine works or doesn't work. So if you hear something like that says it's an SSRI, it's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Sometimes serotonin is not just the message, but it's that chemical that's in charge of pleasure, anxiety, calmness, not calmness, right? So some people, the message is being sent, but the message is not getting picked up. Or some people, the message is not being sent. And so we have to beef up these messages being sent, right? So if somebody's is depressed, the messages aren't even getting sent, right? And so this dendrite can't even pick up the messages, right? And somebody like Peyton with ADHD severe, he has so many neurons firing, so many axons sending out these dendrites. I mean, just like billions, or like maybe you and I have like 1 billion. This kid has like 7 billion, right? It's so much going on at the same time, right? He can't exactly focus. What happens is that when you take a stimulant medication, this is another little key to the kingdom here. A lot of people don't know this one. Stimulant medications, you hear this concept about stimulant medications help you calm down, help hyper people calm down, or like I have coffee and it helps me wake up. It actually gets the right message to the right receiver. So with ADHD severe, and we'll talk more about this in, I think, chapter 10, can think of a ball game, a baseball game, right? When you have one pitcher and one catcher, right? So you have one message and one receiver. You have a pitcher, you have a catcher, you have a pitcher, you have a catcher, pitcher, a catcher. Kids with, I'll do it like this, a pitcher and a catcher, a pitcher and a catcher. Kids with ADHD have 1,000 pitchers, 1,000 pitchers throwing a ball and trying to get it into this one dendrite, this one synapse, this one neurotransmitter is trying to do all this work. And what a stimulant medication does is it doesn't change this, but it actually makes the one in the middle of all this, like, get a little bit more aggressive, get a little bit more sophisticated and send that message. It sorts through them more efficiently. It doesn't stop the brain from moving. It just sorts them inefficiently. And yes, the school keeps texting me because he ran out of his meds and go to the pharmacy and the doctor didn't even refill his prescription. So that's super fun. Yeah, so that's where we're at today. Yeah. The myelin right here is almost like it says coating, an axon coating. Consider it like have you ever been in a water slide or just a regular slide and like you get stuck, right? But when you have that water, it kind of helps those things go smoother and quicker. My doctor has actually discussed this with me about Peyton's myelination. He may be over myelinated, meaning he's like, the messages are going so quick, it's like sliding through, or maybe he might be under myelinated to where they're getting stuck and the wrong ones are getting through. Yeah, these are questions I have with doctors now because they know I understand this stuff, right? And then we'll talk about the actual, in this class, we will talk about in the next unit, the parts of the brain. There's a lot, maybe it's next chapter, parts of the brain. I'm just going to do the basic ones in this class. This is not a brain class. We do have a brain class, which I'm really excited about too. But we'll talk about the cortex, which is really this outside part. I do believe it shows up in next unit, a YouTube video of this like little dad teacher guy who goes through all the parts of the brain and kind of puts mnemonic devices and little stuffies, and he'll say cortex, like the cortex is this top part of your head. So like, I'm going to wear my Texas hat, like, so you remember these things. So the cortex and things like that. The prefrontal cortex is here. Limbic system is on the inside, right? So brain parts that interact to produce emotions. The things that are crucial for body, for human survival are on the inside, right? We have ribs that protect our lungs, right? We have hips that protect our organs, right? We have a patella that protects our knee. Same thing with our brain. All the important stuff's on the inside. On the outside is like the stuff that, yeah, this stuff is for thinking and college up here. But quite frankly, if it comes between, should I keep breathing or should I go to college? I think the breathing wins. Yeah. So we're going to find out with our brain structures, the body is elegantly made on purpose. Again, these are the parts in the middle, the hippocampus and the hypothalamus. Inside parts, right? Hippocampus, I like to think of it as like an elephant never forgets, but a hippo's big too. So there's the memory piece, right? And the hypothalamus, this is the guy on the video talks about the hypothalamus, and it's hilarious. He brings out a llama, and this is, it responds to the amygdala and the hippocampus. They all kind of work together to produce hormones. Now we'll talk more about the hormones, especially when it comes to puberty. And I'll even mention while we're learning about puberty, how menopause is reverse puberty. No joke. And even in the trauma class, we're learning about how that same connection between the brain and the hormones and the pituitary gland and the adrenals, and where cortisol comes in and pituitary gland, all that little part is very stress triggered and can be exacerbated by stress or long-term exposure to stress, and then all hell breaks loose. It's why puberty is starting earlier and girls are getting their periods at like 8. I was 14. This one generation later, it's 8. Stress. Yeah, it's wild. So cortisol is that primary stress hormone. It's secreted off of your adrenals, which are on top of your kidneys. A lot of times when you're stressed, you can have adrenal fatigue. I've been tested for that. I didn't have that. Thought I did. I do not. A cortisol is cumulative over lifetime. It actually is highest on the day that you die. but you can kind of back it down a little bit, but it's very, very hard. It's called like a month-long ashram visit to get that cortisol in check. I would love it. Pituitary responses signals from the hypothalamus by hormone production. Pituitary is like this little gland. I'm going to say here, but the reason I say it's here, it looks like your uvula in the back of your throat, but it's actually in the brain. It's like a little U-shaped sac. Actually, it looks a little bit like a scrotum. And it's right here, right, the pituitary gland, right? So this right here, I will have on your actual exam. Yeah, but that's not for 2 weeks. Well, after this week, it's 2 weeks. And I will ask you the boxes. The rest of them are a little bit supportive issues. But again, the prefrontal cortex, again, this is the executive functions. We'll talk a lot about this in this class. Executive functions is how you organize, how you memorize, how you do one thing, then the other, then the other. Kids with ADHD and autism typically have very low executive function, or you call it executive dysfunction. We'll talk more about that. Auditory cortex obviously is our ears. It comes in here on our temporal lobe. It processes through here, right? We'll talk more about our ears too, especially if we want to learn about hearing impaired. Come to 205, we'll learn that together. The amygdala is the neural centers in the limbic system linked to emotion. So I remember Amy G. Dalla, my best friend's name is Amy, so it's easy for me to say that. Like my emotions are in my amygdala, right? And they could be big emotions, they could be small, like mad, sad, or glad. The hippocampus is, again, that's the hippo is smart like the elephant. The elephant's not just a smart one, just the hippo is too. The hypothalamus, this is like the endocrine system. This is like I call it like the inside, like everything keeps moving. Your endocrine system, which is your hormones, your eating, like, yeah, if your hypothalamus is off, like, yeah, it linked to emotion and rewards. A lot of us reward ourselves with food. Yeah. And that's how we were rewarded as children. So it's these things where our hypothalamus kind of like helps manage some of those things there too. Your visual cortex is not right behind your eyes. It's actually way, way back here, which is really interesting. Kids with autism or people with sensory processing disorder usually have a highly, highly developed visual cortex. If you have highly sensitive eyes, you might have a highly developed visual cortex. And then the cerebral cortex, again, is that Texan hat. It's the whole top part that helps. It's kind of like your storage unit. It helps process information, and it doesn't exactly store information. It sort of does, and then your amygdala goes and gets it. Yeah. So I would say watch the video that's in there. It's called How to Memorize Parts of the Brain. Super fun. But again, these pink and blue boxes are going to be your go-to. So how are we doing so far? I want to check in. I'm kind of throwing a lot at you. Listen, I've had other professors say, oh, wow, you guys talk about the brain and child development? You guys talk about DNA and child development? Yeah. Yeah. I say, no, we only just talk about the parts that the babies are made out of. Right? So how are you guys doing so far? This is a lot of information. You're like, ew, I didn't want to learn about the brain. The brain's ewy. No? Yeah? All of the above? How are you doing? Give me a one word in the chat. Following, fine, good, weird, mind blown, bored. One word in the chat, please. There we go. There we go. There we go. Good. Summer's good. Was good. Be sure you jump in. Fine. You know, fine is an acronym for. I can't say it because we're recording. So exuberance and pruning. We talked a little bit earlier about how the brain grows like fireworks, especially when something interesting. If you are holding a brightly colored toy or letting them play with it or letting them touch with it, if I handed this to a baby, what would they do? If I literally handed this to a newborn, like a 1-month-old kid, what would they do? Provided it's not dangerous. What would they do with it if I handed this to them?
Maybe put it in their mouth.
Exactly, Summer, you got it. Yeah, they don't have words. They don't say, ooh, I want to touch that. Looks so totally cool. Let me try. They go like this. What is it? What do they actually learn from putting this in their mouth? What, like if I put this in my mouth right now, what would I notice? Anybody? Summer's on point today. I would feel.
Probably that they can't eat it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, okay, well, it's not food, darn, right? Right? But they'd be like, it's smooth. It's, I mean, they might not have the words, right? But they're feeling something with their tongue, like it's kind of smooth. And maybe it tastes like my hand lotion, right? And there's like a little ridge right here. So it's smooth with a little ridge. And they don't know what round is, but like there's, right. Versus if I gave them something like an eraser, like you don't want to give this is definitely a choking hazard, but this is smooth too, but it's soft, right? And it's different. So even just that, I don't know the words, but I know it's different, is exuberance, especially if they're interested in it. Have you ever seen those YouTube videos where a baby just sits and like laughs at a dog, or a cat? They just sit there and laugh, and the cats and the dogs doing nothing, and the baby's just sitting there laughing. That is exuberance, right? It sounds like an emotional state, but it's actually a brain state, which is a beautiful thing. Their brain is, they're just like, they're so fascinated, and there's something about that cat or dog that they're just processing, and like it's fuzzy and they don't even have to touch it, but they're looking at it and it's different colors and different textures, and you know, maybe the dog comes over and licks them and whatnot, like, oh yeah, and the kid's like giggling, they can't stop. That's how you know that they are learning, even if they're not even touching something. It's a beautiful thing. And then we'll talk about when those parts don't work. You know, like if we, let's say we went to a friend's house and they had a ferret, and the baby was interacting with a ferret, but that person never saw a ferret for the rest of their life. They would still recognize a ferret, but that experience of petting a ferret, that some of those memories might go away. And that's fine. That's not the end of the world, right? Especially because I just learned that ferrets are illegal in California. I didn't know that. I was like, okay. But here's the thing, we'll learn about pruning, especially in adolescence. The brain starts to be like, hey, if you don't use it, you lose it. As a measure of, if you haven't seen this, in the extra credit section, you can watch a movie and write like a 2-page paper on it. I will take Inside Out as the Disney animated movie. Yeah, because it actually uses brain science to create that movie, and they are not wrong. They're not wrong. This next piece is very important. Experience expected, experience dependent brain function. Let me go back one. Experience expectant brain function and experience dependent brain function. This is the same thing as what I'm saying. I've never pet a ferret. I know what a ferret looks like because I've seen it in pictures, but I don't have the experience of petting a ferret. So I don't have the brain knowledge that is associated with petting a ferret. It's not the end of the world. I can still continue with my life successfully, I promise. But expectant brain, that's depending. So that experience has to do with depending if I have been exposed to that, right? Experience expectant brain function is, number one, your brain is going to grow on its own just by looking at something. By looking at a light, moving ahead, your brain is still growing. By the way, moving your body like this is input into your brain. Moving your hands like this, moving your hands like this, that is input into your brain. Yeah, there's more than 5 senses. Me having my arms out like this uses a different sense called proprioception. And we'll talk more about that too. If I had one arm here and one arm here and one arm, like, again, it's giving me input, right? So expectant brain function means it is expected, meaning our brain is going to grow, our brain is going to be stimulated, our brain is going to learn. Again, this is the neurotypical brain. And things like language are expected from that. We expect a body to grow larger. We expect a brain to get faster. We expect language to develop. So as far as we know, nobody's had the Benjamin Button disease for realsies, right? But that would be an unexpected brain function, right? That guy got younger. The guy got younger as he grew, right? And that's opposite of what we do. As we grow, we are expected to learn and grow, right? We want to learn language. We want to communicate with others. We want to be around people. We want to learn things. That is expectant brain function. Dependent brain function is whether or not you've been exposed to it. Now, I particularly, this is going to sound weird. I use the example as a ferret because I've never pet a ferret before. But when I was a kid, I had a pet possum because I'm weird. Only for like 3 months, and because we caught it in our backyard in like a trap or something. And you know what? You've all seen what a possum looks like, right? What you don't know is that they are soft like a kitten. They don't look like it. They look like, and they're blind during the day and they hiss. They're not super cuddly, but I could hold one with one glove and pet it with another during the day. During nighttime, it was very, very active. But yeah, and then we got big enough and we let it go out in the field or whatever. But he said, was asking me questions about like, so what are possums like? I was like, wow, I have this experience, so I should share it with him. Situation. I've never held a sloth or a koala or a hedgehog and things like that. So I don't have that brain function. I don't have that brain memory, right? But again, expected means it is expected no matter what. Dependent means it's dependent on the exposure, right? Yeah. We learned this stuff in 110 too as a backup, which is great. Let's see here. Language studies. Woo! We're going to do a lot more in next chapter about language, the secret life, the secret genius of babies, the linguistic genius of babies. I love it. Babies learn language because they are exposed to it. If I spoke Mandarin to a child, they will learn Mandarin. That is experience dependent, but also language development is experience expectant. So children will learn whatever language they are exposed to, right? We've learned of children born in one country and raised in this country. And yeah, they, like my niece and nephew, they learned Korean for their first 6 months of life. They had some of the sounds and things like that, but not full language, right? And they came here and it was all English and they learned English, right? It's same thing. We have kids from Romanian orphanages and things like that. Yeah, we don't, as far as I know, we don't speak Romanian here. We might. But again, we learn what we're exposed to. That is experience dependent brain processing. Trying to get to our piece here. And then we'll talk about facial recognition. Babies are geniuses like with facial recognition. Hold on, let me make sure I'm on the right one. There we go. You guys can, again, I'm not going to like test you too much on this, but yes, a parent before the first birthday persists with our own race. Our brains are hardwired to pick out what is the same as us and what is different from us. And so my boss, who is African American, she believes that racism is hardwired, and it's not bad in its own on its own, because it is a survival instinct. Go watch The Croods, right? The Croods is like, these are our people and those are your people, right? And that wasn't wrong, and we are still hardwired that way. It's just whether we choose in this sophisticated society to make that be a point of contention and saying, well, that person is different from me, therefore they will kill me or hurt me or they're wrong. That is not necessarily true. We are more sophisticated as a species now. And so I do give people the benefit of a doubt of having hardwiring, because we do all have a lizard brain. We all have that lizard brain on the inside where we just need to survive, right? If something was chasing us, we would still survive. But our own race effect is evident before the first birthday. Yeah, before kids are one, they could say like same or different. Maybe they don't know the words, but they can point out, and we'll talk more about that as well. Oh, harming the infant brain. Please don't do it. Shaken baby syndrome. When we were in the classroom, I actually have a model that works on that stuff. Severe social deprivation. Talking about this in trauma class this week about Romanian orphanages who left kids alone for a month, like a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, and how their IQ dropped up to 30 points. Conversely, they took kids who were deemed as intellectually disabled, or we used to call it mentally retarded. We now say intellectually disabled. Taking those kids, even if they were born to intellectually disabled mothers, in an institution or incarcerated, and giving and having systems of care for that child, their IQ actually raises a little bit, not a whole lot, but enough to where they can function outside of they did these long-term 30-year studies starting in the 30s, ending in the 60s, about how you can change somebody's brain structure and functioning or IQ or social functioning just by having primary caretakers. system of supports, maybe multiple primary caretakers, and then their kids, IQ totally normal. Yeah, we can change generations. We can make people dumber. We can make people smarter. We can make people more understanding. We can make people worse. It's really a lot. There's a lot of, it's all about exposure, experience dependence, right? If you're only grown up in a place where people say everybody other than us is bad, that's what you're going to know. Yeah. Same thing applies to religious organizations and political. Yeah. But our lizard brain wins every time. We'll talk about sensory development, sensation, and perception. A lot of this has to do with how our brain is functioning. Now, sensory development is how we sense the world: touch, taste, feel, hear, smell. And then again, our sensation, it's what we register. Now, some kids over-register and some kids under-register. Have you ever like hit yourself on the corner of a table and like totally missed it and kept moving? And then later you're like, where did I get this bruise? You under-registered that. Or you get a tiny paper cut and it's like, oh crap, the day's done. Like, right? That could be an over-registration too. But I think the smallest injuries hurt the worst. That's my opinion. But and perception is the mental processing. So when like you stub your toe and it's like no big deal, but your friend stubs their toe and it's the end of the world, that's their perception. That is a biological construct. We cannot argue that. And again, we'll talk more about hearing occurs in the temporal lobe, and then it turns into language into the Broca's area. This is just an intro right now. We're going to talk a lot more about that with the brain structures, the brain functioning, but just know that perception follows sensation, right? There's not very many times where like, let's say a book falls on your toe and right before it falls, you felt it. No, it falls, it hits your toe, then you feel it, right? And this piece of feeling plus hearing, right? Our ears do a lot of pinpointing for us. It really kind of puts hearing, it's not just what it's said, it's how it's being said, but where it's being said, right? Or trying to orient to even something like could be possibly dangerous. You could hear a train from far away, or you could hear maybe in my neighborhood, we have overhead fireworks almost every night of the year, because I live in Santa Ana. And like, is it a gunshot or is it a firework? Like, not gonna lie, right? Again, hearing, guess what? This is a test question. Hearing develops during the last trimester of pregnancy. As the most advanced of the newborn senses. Hearing. Yep, absolutely. When kids are born, it takes a good 6 weeks for things to come into focus, and we'll talk more about that. But the first thing they see in mom is the color difference here, right? Between hair and skin, and then their eye slowly moves down to meet your eyes. And then the color between the brown and the white, or the blue and the white, that color difference is what grabs them as well. Sometimes you'll notice the first few weeks, they're not even really looking in your eyes. See, look at this right now. This little guy, I'm assuming it's a he, is looking at his mouth because it moves. He's not looking up at his eyes. Yeah, it's really fun. And again, seeing is the least mature sense at birth. And a newborn's focus being 4 and 30 inches away. Look at that. That is caretaker space. Isn't that lovely? Binocular vision doesn't occur for 3 months. Wow. Smell and taste, I love it. I love giving kids like sour stuff, but you got to watch that. Lemon and lime is not good for growing teeth, so just be careful. May have an evolutionary function, meaning like if it's not good to taste, maybe it's not good to eat. We ever figured out why we don't have a lot of blue food? What do we have? Blueberries, blackberries, maybe? Because blue is a lizard brain sensation of that could be mold and dangerous. Sense of touch is very, very cute. We can touch them and hold them and cuddle them and whatnot. Especially that swaddling gives them that protective factor that feels like they're in the womb again. They love being securely held. Very, very important. Okay, let me see here. I keep scrolling and then it does the wrong thing. Let's see. Ooh, touch and pain. Yay. This is reflexes. I'm not sure if we're going to get all to the reflexes here. Touch and pain. Okay, so this right here is what they do right when the baby's born. They prick their heel, and then they do the little dots here. This also tells you the Rh factor, the type, the blood type that they have. We didn't get this when Peyton was born, so we actually did that right when COVID hit, because I knew my blood type and my husband didn't know his, and we didn't know Peyton's. And we all have different ones. I'm O-pos, Peyton's A-pos, and my husband's A-neg. And so, yeah, they'll cry, but they'll get over it. Trust me this way. Peyton had a circumcision when he was about 3 months old, and there was a topical pain reliever, but there was no shots to get a circumcision. I mean, he cried, but you know what they did? This is the weirdest thing. They took his pacifier and dipped it into sugar water, and that distracted him sensorily, well, almost well enough to have him not cry. It was wild. Could you imagine? Yeah. Motor skills. Big shock here. I'm going to let us go. Let's see. We're on 30. Let's see. Oh, yeah, 30. Let's stop here. Motor skills. We'll stop at motor skills. So motor skills are two types. Large, gross motor or large, or fine motor or small, right? So think about it this way, your muscles. Gross motor skills are the biggest muscles in your body. So arms, legs, gluteus, things like that. It's lifting, jumping, skipping, walking, running, like all that business. Large gross motor skills. And it doesn't mean gross, like ew, gross. It means just gross. It means large. And then fine motor skills is anything with small muscles. Like it could be in our facial muscles. It could be this kind of situation. It could be just moving one thing to another. Excuse me. It could be pinching. It could be sorting, things like that. So gross motor skills. Here we go. Yeah. Yes, look at that. Advancing and advanced at 8 months. Yeah, Peyton didn't crawl until 10 months. And when we tried to get him even to get ready to crawl at 9 months, he squawked. He was delayed in a lot of ways. All his milestones were delayed. But I remember we had an adoption picnic, and it was like National Adoption Month in November, and we went to the whole thing, and we put him down to crawl, and he was like, "We're not abusing our child in the middle of the adoption picnic." But again, you'll learn here about gross motor and fine motor skills. Yeah, she might be really motivated. She might be a young sibling out of a bunch where she's got to keep up with older siblings, or she's the oldest one where she's just around adults and she needs to keep up with adults. Yeah, so she will probably be walking for a year. Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk more about motor skills on Wednesday. Good. Okay, I'm going to stop recording, but any comments?